And then I saw another guy who was an associate of George Lucas's. His name was Gino Havens. And I didn't see George. George was in a big leather chair, and the leather chair was turned away from me. I don't know, he was doing something, and he spun around in his chair, and he looked at me, and he went, Commander Baylock, Corbomite maneuver. And in my mind, I went, George, get an effing life. See, here I was. I was a young man trying to get an adult job. And here, the first thing that comes out of the director's mouth is a recall of something I did when I was a baby.
Make some noise for the incredible, legendary Clint Howard is here. Come on.
Thank you guys very much.
You are not worthy, sir.
Well, come on. Okay. Yes, you're not worthy. Then why the hell are you up here?
So I am really excited for this panel. We've done one together, but your career is so extensive that I actually do not even have to ask about any of the same projects again because you've done that many movies that I love. But I am a big fan of the entire Howard family. So I've always been curious, do your memories of your career predate your memories of your dad's career?
Well, no. First of all, it's really nice to be here, by the way. I enjoy it. And I have my mom's gift of gab, and I certainly just put a quarter in me and I'll go. But my memories of my life, I have brief glimpses of memory from when I was 2 and 3 years old. Now, that I started working on the Andy Griffith Show when I was 2.5 years old, but I don't, honest to God, don't have any memories of working on the Andy Griffith Show. I worked on a TV pilot in about 1963 called, what was it? Breaking Away? No, it wasn't Breaking Away. Now I'm fumbling, but it was a pilot that I worked on. And I do have memories, and the memory was this. As a little toddler, my job in the scene was to bang 2 pans together. And making that noise while being held in an actor's arms, I have memory of that. But as far as me having just lucid memories of me being in show business, probably 1965. I worked on a TV series for one season called The Baileys of Balboa with Paul Ford and Sterling Holloway. And by the way, Sterling Holloway did the voice of Winnie the Pooh, which a few years later, I played Roo. I did the voice of Roo in the very first Winnie the Pooh animated. It wasn't even a full-length feature. I think it was like 50 minutes. But I did do the voice of Roo. But in this TV series, Paul Ford, Sterling Holloway, Bill Dana. I played this little kid, and it obviously I played a little kid. But I have memories of working on that. And primarily, the reason why I have memories of working on that is we would have to take car trips from Burbank down to Newport Beach, because the Baileys of Balboa was Balboa Island. And so we filmed down there, and down there in Newport Beach. So I have memories of taking those car trips. So anyway, and of course my dad's career started before I was born.
Right, of course.
You know, my dad's Screen Actors Guild number was ridiculous. My dad's number, because it's chronological order. The first members of Screen Actors Guild were like 1 through 60. But my dad was like 1,200. I'm 15,000, which is pretty remarkable. I started a long time ago. So anyway, that, it's weird to think that I was working as an actor before I knew what I was doing.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite role of your dad's?
Of my dad's?
Yeah.
My dad was great in a TV movie. My dad, Rance Howard, by the way, who is a Hall of Fame human being. He's passed away. And I think of him almost on a daily basis. But he did a part in, I think it was just a TV movie. Tommy Lee Jones played Gary Gilmore. Gary Gilmore was a fellow that got put to death in Utah for killing somebody. over like $58. He robbed Gary Gilmore, real life human being. He shot somebody at a gas station. He robbed the gas station, and what he got was a pittance. I think it might have been less than, yeah. And my dad played the Mormon detective interrogating Gary Gilmore for the first time, and Tommy Lee Jones played the role. And so my dad did a great scene with Tommy Lee Jones. My dad was great in a number of things. Here's one that you guys may remember. My dad was in a movie called Gung Ho, yes, which was directed by Ron, my brother. And my dad played the mayor. And there was a couple of funny scenes where my dad played this bumbling mayor.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. So my dad was a great actor. Also, too, my dad and I got to work together right before he got sick and passed away, which was a few years ago. I think he passed away in 2017. And we worked on a movie together called Appleseed. And it was probably the best role my dad ever had. A little small Odyssey movie directed by a guy named Michael Worth. And Showtime picked it up and showed it for, a couple of months. It's getting ready to come out on Blu-ray. And Adrienne Barbeau is in it. Robbie Benson is in it. My dad plays this wonderfully kind of eccentric old guy that ends up traveling cross country with this younger guy on this kind of weird odyssey. And I play my dad's son. And what do you call it when they don't get along? Estranged son. So the scene that I had with my dad was a real dynamic scene, but it was so opposite of our relationship because I love my dad dearly and I know he loved me. And in the movie, it's completely the opposite. So if you guys hear about it in the next year or so, it's called Appleseed, and you should definitely check it out to watch Rance Howard in his finest hour.
Oh, absolutely. Mark my calendar. I'm set. So I want to reiterate, again, this is your panel, guys. More than welcome to jump in with questions whenever you want. As soon as I see hands, I'm happy to call them out. Oh, okay, there we go.
It's an honor to see you here once again. Thank you for being here. I was going to ask about Gun Ho, but we'll pivot here a bit. That was my son saw it for the first time, and I mentioned to him that dad and dad was terrific. But we'll pivot a bit to The Odd Couple. I'm working with Jack Klugman and on that series. What was that like working with Gary Marshall?
First of all, it was a great experience. That was before they started shooting The Odd Couple in front of a live audience. So we shot it like I was used to filming, which was, master shot, close up, moving on to a different set. Shooting in front of a live audience is a completely different animal because when you do live, it's more like theater. You have to open up to the audience, and it's not quite like film acting. But The Odd Couple was a great experience, and I remember both Jack Klugman and Tony Randall being really great dudes. I was probably 12 years old at the time. I wasn't really privy to the higher echelon of the show, like Gary Marshall. I didn't know Gary Marshall. I didn't know him until Happy Days and my experiences being around that show. I remember working with the actors, and Jack was so giving. My dad and Jack Klugman were friends. They had worked together years and years before in the touring company of a Broadway play called Mr. Roberts. So it was back when they were both young pups getting started. They knew each other. And I just remember it being real easy. Acting has always been easy for me because I learned how to do it before I really knew. By osmosis, I learned how to act. And my dad gave me some simple technique about how to really be organic as an actor. Really listen. And also, too, know where you came from and where you want to go. Every person has a motivation for doing everything they do. Now, when you're doing a teleplay, when you're acting, you sort of got to magnify it. But as a child, my dad would always say, where do you think your character was? Was he in the other room playing? Why are you going into the kitchen? Do you think you want ice cream? whatever it was, it made my wheels turn. It wasn't about memorizing dialogue. I mean, yes, you technically have to memorize dialogue as an actor. You have to know it. You can't fumble. You're expected as a performer to know what you're doing. But it's not about just memorizing it. It's about, well, what's this character thinking? What's he want? You know, working on The Odd Couple was one of a series of jobs. In fact, when The Odd Couple came out, when it aired on TV that night, ABC, I believe it was, I had been on The Family Affair. I did an episode of Family Affair, and it was an episode where Buffy kicked my ass, which, you know, that's not one of my red letter moments in my film career, but it was, they appeared on the same night. That night, Clint Howard was on 2 primetime programs. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And here's a detail about The Odd Couple. It was directed, that episode was directed by a guy named Bruce Bilson. Bruce Bilson was an Emmy-winning TV director, and he won his Emmy for Get Smart. But his very, very early days in the business, Bruce Bilson was an assistant director on the Andy Griffith Show, which, if you want to do that 6 degrees of separation, my goodness, it's weird with me. For instance, on the Andy Griffith Show, do you realize that Jack Nicholson did an episode of the Andy Griffith Show? You knew, somebody knew? Yeah. Now, there was a fellow who one of his first jobs, well, it wasn't his first job, but the man's name is Fred Roos. Fred ended up becoming a confidant of both George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola. Fred Roos, I think he was working for AIP Pictures. He discovered Jack Nicholson. He was the guy that said, this guy's going to be good. We got to put him in movies. So Jack started showing up in some of those old early movies in the 50s. Well, that was Fred Roos's responsibility. Fred Roos was a casting associate on the Andy Griffith Show. That's pretty weird. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Fred Roos was in the room when I auditioned for Star Wars. Back in 1975, Ron had worked on American Graffiti. So Ron knew George Lucas. And then George Lucas knew who I was. And this is way before there was videotape. Casting directors, if they wanted to see you, they didn't ask for tape. They had you come in and audition, which George Lucas is getting ready to do this science fiction movie, Star Wars. People knew about it, but they didn't really know what it was. People thought it was kind of weird, you know. But I had an audition, 20th Century Fox Studios. And I went in, I read the sides. I was going to read for Luke Skywalker. I was already beginning to lose my hair, and I didn't think I had too much of a shot, but I wasn't going to turn down the audition. It was going to be an adult role. I was still kind of, you know, I was, 15 or 16 years old at the time. So I go in on the audition. And I walk into the room. Oh, by the way, in the waiting area, which was outdoors, I saw Mark Hamill. And Mark Hamill and I had competed against each other on various auditions. You got to realize, we used to all know each other. Because if you're in the same age, they're going to see 25 people, and there's a good chance that Mark Hamill was going to be there, and I was going to be there. So I saw Mark Hamill waiting. But I went into the room. And I walk into the room, and first thing I see is Francis Ford Coppola. My goodness, Jesus, he's a larger than life, and you know, he had done Godfather, and my God, he's a god himself. My mouth drops open, and then I look and I see Fred Roos, and I know Fred. I didn't know him real well, but I knew him, and he was a confidant of George's. And then I saw another guy who was an associate of George Lucas's. His name was Gino Havens. And I didn't see George. George was in a big leather chair, and the leather chair was turned away from me. I don't know, he was doing something, and he spun around in his chair, and he looked at me, and he went, Commander Baylock, Corbomite maneuver. And in my mind, I went, George, get an effing life. See, here I was, I was a young man trying to get an adult job. And here, the first thing that comes out of the director's mouth is a recall of something I did when I was a baby. Now, as it turns out, George got a wonderful life, but I didn't understand what Star Trek and that whole experience was going to be. I didn't know the impact that I was going to have on people because I'd been a kid actor and I ended up going ahead and having a career as an adult. And, it's got to be weird. People grow up watching me grow up. I mean, it would kind of freak me out, So anyway, at that audition, I had no clue about, he was just a Trekkie. He was like a Star Trek geek before there were Star Trek geeks. It was before there was syndication. It was before there was videotape. But George, when he was a young guy, he saw Star Trek and something happened. It connected with him. So, and I've had the chance to talk to him over the years, and he doesn't have a distinct memory of me going in on auditioning. So, he doesn't know the impact he had on me. But he's a really nice guy, and him and my brother have remained close over the years. And in fact, one thing, when Ron got the job to direct Solo, it was sort of they had hired guys. There were guys that had directed Solo for months before they let them go. And then they looked around, and then they went into negotiations, and they hired my brother. My brother called me. He was really happy, and because it's Star Wars, He also said there might be a part for me, which made me even happier. As it turned out, there was a part for me, and Ron said to me, he goes, I called George as soon as I found out the deal was closed. I called George and I said, George, I just want to let you know that I'm taking over the director work for Solo. And what George said is hilarious. I told them to hire you in the first place. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, man.
I don't know. That bounced a long way from talking about Odd Couple.
That did, but I love it. That's a fantastic answer. If I could actually piggyback on that, because we brushed up against Gary Marshall and Happy Days, I was curious what your favorite memories of that experience was.
Well, my favorite memories of Happy Days was getting to play on the Happy Days softball team.
Oh, man, I've heard about this.
Yeah, you see, I played high school baseball. I was a 2-year varsity letterman. I pitched. I learned how to catch in high school, and I ended up catching fast pitch softball for a few years after that. That's probably one reason why I have 2 artificial hips. But I was kind of a ringer. And of course, I'd been an actor. I was an actor. And so Gary invited me to participate in the Happy Days softball team, which I loved it. Henry Winkler was the pitcher. So I was Henry's personal catcher. And he happened to have a real knack for it, even though he's not very athletic. In fact, his arm was so weak, everything he threw kind of tailed, which I realized it worked because it would jam everybody. And I set Henry up to throw inside. And everybody, if they hit it hard, they'd pull it. Most of the time, people were sort of nervous, hitting against Fonzie. And he was a very effective pitcher, but we got to play in Shea Stadium, at Wrigley Field, at County Stadium in Milwaukee. We played at Dodger Stadium. We played at Anaheim Stadium. We played in Seattle at the old Kingdome. San Francisco. We toured. I probably played 20 various places, including Okinawa. So listen, I was in 2 episodes of Happy Days, but I don't care. I cared about playing. I cared about playing in front of 60,000 people at Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. That was a blast. In fact, in one of our photo albums at the house, somebody on the Happy Days crew was taking snapshots of the stadium board. And they have a snapshot of me, Clint Howard, number 12, and up there on the big stadium board. And there were still some people, as high as that stadium scoreboard was, there were still people there. Happy Days was so popular, it sold out. When they had the Happy Days softball team playing at County Stadium in Milwaukee, which Milwaukee was the hometown of Happy Days, it was sold out. They had like 40,000 people the night at Shea Stadium. that the Happy Day softball team played. So getting to participate in that was a blast.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it sounds like a blast. So I do want to give the audience another chance to jump in there, guys. I know it gets shy on a Friday night. I have plenty of questions just in case, but I see one back here, and then we'll go up front after.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories or anything about the Wraith?
Oh, he asked if you had stories about the Wraith.
Yeah, no, the Wraith was a great experience. It really was. It was a modestly budgeted little movie with a lot of young people in it. We became friends. There were 2 movies in my career where working on the movie, I met people that we bonded and created kind of a lifetime friendship together. One was Apollo 13, which happened in 1995 or 1994, and one was The Wraith, which was like 1986. We shot The Wraith, and directed by a guy named Mike Marvin, Charlie Sheen, and I'm still friends with Charlie. Nick Cassavetes, I'm still very much friends with Nick Cassavetes. The 2 guys that played Skank and Gutter Boy, Dave Sherrill and Jamie Bozian, I certainly call them my friends. It was a bonding experience. Griffin O'Neill. I mean, there's a lot of stories I can't tell you about what happened going on in that location. Because these fellas, we certainly, when we had downtime, we uplifted ourselves, if you know what I mean. Charlie was a young buck. Charlie had not even gotten the job to work on Platoon yet. Yeah. So, and he's a really good soul. I know things have gotten sort of said about him, and there's been circumstances and stuff, and probably some behavior that he's done that he'd probably like to take back. But I just know that dude has an amazing heart, and he also cares, and he also listens, and I have a lot of respect for Charlie. So, the Wraith. Also, one thing I'll say about the Wraith is it holds up. When you see it now, the music is really good, and yeah, there's some stuff that's a little spotty about it, but by God, it's a fast-moving thing, and there's laughs, and it's serious, and it's got a theme to it, and I played Rughead, which was cool.
I feel like it's one of those movies that's gotten a little bit more popular every year. It's like the cult status of it has grown. Has that ever surprised you with The Wraith?
Well, has it surprised me? Yeah, I would say a little yes, because it did not perform real well. It came out and it had a kind of a tepid reaction, and marketing a movie is tricky, and the timing of when it comes out in theaters is tricky, and then how it gets handled in the secondary market, meaning videotape, and if those don't get played right, it can end up in the bargain basement, But I went back and watched it a few years later, and I really did appreciate it. I thought, I laughed when Mike Marvin once wanted the audience to laugh, and, I thought the racing scenes were really cool. And it was all done. I mean, there was a little CG done with the alien coming down and inhabiting the car showing up. But as far as the car racing goes, that was all just old-fashioned, camera trucks following guys racing on those roads in the foothills above Tucson, Arizona.
That's incredible. So we had another question up front, I believe. Oh, ask about Tango and Cash.
Oh, yeah. I do have one. I have a story about Sly. First of all, I got bad scouting reports. I got word that Sly was really difficult to work with. By that point, he had been in Rocky, he had been in First Blood, he had played Rambo, and that the word on the street, the word in the business was he was a pain. So I was braced for it. And my day working on the set of Tango and Cash could not have been better. Sly as an acting partner was awesome. I went back to some of these people that gave me a bad scouting report, and I said, that's horseshit. Because Sly was a pro, Now, it wasn't Long Day's Journey into Night, but for neither one of us, it was, it was a kind of a light, buddy comedy. Not really a comedy, but it was just they had a good tone. But Sly as an acting partner was right there with me. I'm never going to badmouth people when they weren't good acting partners. I've had them. I've had people that I've worked with that I didn't really, after finishing working with them, I didn't really respect them. You know, and maybe they had a bad day, maybe they didn't. But with Sly, it was awesome. Also, too, Tango and Cash was the day I met Larry King. I was a radio guy. Growing up, by the time I was 14 and 15 years old, I knew there was late night radio, and I would listen to it. And Larry King, way before CNN, Larry King was a disc jockey or just a late night talk guy that would have that show from 11 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning. And I just loved his voice, and he talked sports, you know, and then I was there on the set of Tango and Cash, and I see little Larry King. He wasn't very big. He couldn't have been more than 125 pounds. And getting the chance, and he was there visiting Kurt Russell and Stallone. You know, it was on the set, and we were on the Warner Brothers studio lot, filming in a soundstage. And it was one of those great days. So, you know, thanks for bringing it up.
If I could actually follow up on that as well. I know there was some behind-the-scenes shakeups on the production of Tango and Cash. Was that before you shot your parts, or was that at all during your shooting?
Well, I went and auditioned for Tango and Cash, and the director was a guy named Andrei Konchalovsky. He was a Russian. He had made a movie called Runaway Train with John Voight, and I believe Steve Railsback.
And Eric Roberts.
Oh, no, it wasn't. It was Eric Roberts. I need to go talk to him about that.
Yes.
But anyway, 2 months before I was supposed to shoot, I went in and met with the director. He liked me, thought I was really interesting, and they hired me for Slinky. By the time I worked on the movie, he had been fired and replaced. Apparently, they started shooting Tango and Cash in a prison in Ohio. And the production wasn't going good. In fact, what I'd heard is they had worked for 2 weeks and they hadn't gotten 1 day's work on the call sheet done. And I believe it was Goober Peters, the two guys, the two producers, and they fired him. They fired Andrei Konchalovsky, and they brought in another director. And I'm very grateful that they didn't recast. A lot of times, if they bring in a new director, the director will have the prerogative to cast the people they want. But I guess they thought I was acceptable, and the new director hired me, and it was a good day of work. But the day I worked, everything was fine. If there had been any dust in the air, if anybody hadn't seen eye to eye, all that had gotten settled down. But I believe it's simply what it was. And I never really talked to Andrei Konchalovsky about him. I met him a couple of times since on other auditions and stuff. But when they hired Andrei Konchalovsky to make Tango and Cash, he had an idea of making one kind of movie. Runaway Train was a tough movie. And yet, you know, what they wanted to make was a lightweight kind of public fun comedy. Not comedy, but, you know, Tango and Cash was a high concept movie. And anyway, so they just didn't see eye to eye. And after a couple of weeks, they let the director go, and they brought in a new guy. And look, that movie made a ton of money, and it did really good. And it's a very popular movie. It's still, people come up, you know, I'll sign a few autographs at every convention. You know, we keep a Tango and Cash photo in our files.
I love that. So we had other audience questions at the moment, or he's a little bit shy. It's okay. I have plenty here to go with.
Here's one up here.
Oh, there is one. Oh, thank you.
So your dad was an actor. You and your brother are actors. Are your children actors also?
Well, you know, Kat and I, we have a daughter, Rafa, who has done some acting. And she's getting ready to be 14 years old, and she's in a rock band, and she's a dancer. She's a world champion judoist. How do you say that, babe? Judo, jiu-jitsu. Anyway, she's a wonderful girl, and I believe she's got some acting in her future. You know, I don't know. I personally, like my brother, never encouraged his children, Ron and Cheryl's, they never encouraged them to be actors. Now, as it turns out, two of them are actors. Bryce has had a wonderful career and continues to have a wonderful career. She's the oldest daughter, And so, but Ron didn't do anything to help them at all. The only thing Ron and Cheryl did was say, you should learn, you should take high school drama, live your life. If acting comes, let it come. Ron has a philosophy about it, and I think there's some truth to it. That Ron and I both overcame this, but it's a difficult hurdle. When you are a child actor in the business, and the business sees you, what gets planted in their brain is, oh, the cute little kid. Well, then you go through puberty and you grow up and you become a man or a woman, as in Bryce's case, and you introduce yourself to the business as a grown-up. It's a weird thing for the business to comprehend. There are, hundreds and hundreds of child actors. There's very few Drew Barrymores. There's very few Jodie Fosters. There are very few Clint Howard and Ron Howards. So I think Ron was very hesitant to encouraging them to be juvenile actors. And if Rafa wants to do that, we are certainly there to help her. But right now, I kind of would say to her, live your life, enjoy yourself. And if acting is in your future, it will happen.
Do you see that maybe some difficulties as a second or third generation maybe of actors, within the family, like difficulties or anything like that?
I think at the end of the day, it's got to help. Name recognition helps, listen, if you're known, you're known. I think Ron and I both, the Howard name is a pretty good name. We're very proud of what Bryce has been doing with her career. She has a sister, Paige Howard, who has done some acting, and she would like to do more. She's doing a lot of voiceover work now. This leads me to something here that myself and Norman Apstein, who was the original director of Ice Cream Man, we've written another Ice Cream Man. We've written another script about another Ice Cream Man. And in that script, there is a wonderful role for Paige. Now, all we've done right now is write the script, and the script was written well before the strike. But anyway, I'm keeping my fingers crossed and I'm keeping my spine straight that we are going to eventually shoot another Ice Cream Man, and that Paige Howard will have a wonderful role in this movie, because once Norman and I got it in our heads about casting, because when you write, you think about the possibilities, and we put the vision of Paige with the vision of this other friend of ours, a guy named Mars Crane, who happens to be 6'6" and weighs 300 pounds. And the two of them together might very well make a wonderful set of cops in an absurd sort of a way. So anyway, that I did, when I mention Paige, it's Ice Cream Man rattles in my head.
Well, I'll be there on day one for Ice Cream Man 2. Just take my money now, please. Right? Yeah. Do I make some noise for that, right? So I do let the audience jump back in there with questions. Here we go.
Is there anything you ever auditioned for that you really wanted that you didn't get?
Oh, hell yes. You got to understand that if an actor can get 15% of the jobs they audition for, they're really good. My batting average, and I used to keep track because I was a big baseball fan, and I would equate it to batting average. If I went through a year where I was, 17%, where I'd get, I'd go on 50 auditions and get 8 jobs, the fact is that means that there's 42 times that you get in your car, you learn your lines, you figure out what you're going to do, you go to the audition, and they say thanks, but no thanks. They don't even say thanks. You have to hear from your agent that you didn't get the job, or time tells you didn't get the job. So yeah, there's quite a few. I'll tell you one in particular. Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton were in a movie called Twister, and I auditioned for Twister. And I got, I was in the first audition, and then I got a call back, and they really liked me, and I went in for a third time. And finally, I was like, okay, I'd really like to play this part. He was a quirky character, happened to be played by, they ended up hiring the right guy, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah. And I never got to meet Philip. I would have told him, I said, listen, buddy, you took my job. And I know we lost Philip a few years ago, and that was sad. But and Philip Seymour Hoffman was a great actor. Jesus. But yeah, Twister was one of those ones. So anyway.
I would love, no disrespect, I love Philip Seymour Hoffman, but I would love to visit the multiverse where you played that role and just watch that film at least once in my life.
Well, I'd like to get to that multiverse and cash that paycheck.
I hear you, yeah, right? An Hamlin paycheck, right?
And listen, guys, real quick, I know we're probably running out of time here. I'm an actor, and I appreciate entertaining people, but I learned, before I knew what I was learning, that it's a job. What I do is it's a job. I fulfill what an employer wants me to do. And in turn, I get a paycheck, which allows you to live a life. There was a few years where I went to unemployment too. Things fell in the right direction, and I ended up getting to the point in my life where I said to myself, I don't need to go get unemployment. I'm going to be okay. But the acting business is a very insecure business. And you got to realize that it's not as glamorous as you think, So I enjoy doing it. I enjoy getting the paychecks. It allows, at this point in my life, it allows Kat and I and our daughter Rafa and our extended family. It gives us a chance to do things that other folks might not get to do, or whatever. But I'm very grateful that God, or whatever, the universe, whatever it is, has sort of navigated my life the way it's been. Great set of parents, great older brother, twists and turns that, sometimes are kind of hair-raising, but I'll take it. I'm 64 years old, and I got very few regrets. And let me make a plug for you guys that might not know. My brother and I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family. And it was Ron and I writing a memoir about our careers as child actors and our careers as not our careers, but our family. There it is. Hold that up right there. Thank you. A New York Times bestseller for a month. And that's something if I have a tombstone, I'm going to etch it on my tombstone. I'm a New York Times bestseller, for God's sake. And my brother and I are very proud of that book, because for us, once Dad passed away, Mom passed 20 years before, and then Dad finally passed. And it was our opportunity to sort of write them a love letter and hopefully express in print what they meant to us. And the fact is, Mom and Dad came from Oklahoma. My dad was a hick. My mom was slightly more sophisticated, but not much. My mom was the daughter of a butcher, and my dad was the first son of a farmer. And for them, growing up in the Depression and then breaking free in the late 40s and early 50s, to venture from Oklahoma first to New York City and then to California, for them to change the course of the Howard family in the way they did is something that both Ron and I are very grateful for. And in the book, we go back a little bit and talk about their history. It's really great. So if you guys haven't heard about it, and it's a good book to pick up. Also, and now I'm going to make another plug. The audio book is Ron speaks his words and I speak mine. It's available through HarperCollins and anywhere where you can get an audio book. And like my wife says, she says, Ron kind of speaks like it's a symphony. Ron has a certain way of talking, and I'm kind of like a rock and roll guy. So, and that's the way we played the book out. It's a dual narrative, and Ron has his opinion of things, and I've got my opinion of things, and sometimes those opinions don't exactly meet in the middle. So anyway.
Well, I think we have time for one more audience question before we wrap it up, guys. And people get pressured. No one wants to be the last question. Here we go.
What are some things that you like currently as far as like TV shows or movies or things that you're like, that's really cool, I like the acting, or things that just catch your eye?
Well, I like the Weather Channel. No, I like films. I like cinema. I appreciate movies now, more than I used to. I went through a period where I saw it and I kind of turned away from it. I thought Mission Impossible was great, what they were able to achieve. I worked with Tom Cruise. I didn't work with him, but he worked on Far and Away. I thought that what they were able to give the crowd in the movie theater was really great. I mean, listen, the claustrophobic nature that they were able to create in a couple of those sequences. My wife, she's a little claustrophobic. She actually got kind of weirded out in the theaters. I had to remind her that the craft service table is right over there to the left. I mean, I can never completely get lost in a movie because I know the tricks. I know, when they say Tom Cruise did all of his stunts. Yeah, he did his stunts in front of a green screen, But movies are wonderful. And listen, my favorites are not of this generation, but I'll give you in fact, I just filled this out. I did a newspaper article for, I'm doing a signing in a collectible toy shop in Lake Havasu in Arizona. And they asked me what my favorite movies were. And I said, Godfather Part 2, All That Jazz. Bob Fosse made a brilliant film. I put Apollo 13 on that list of favorite movies, and it ain't because I'm in it. I just thought it was a superior piece of filmmaking. The Exorcist, that's 4. Godfather Part 2, The Exorcist, Apollo 13, All That Jazz, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which probably, if I would list the greatest movie I've ever seen, it would be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So anyway, there it is.
That's incredible. Well, unfortunately, we are just about out of time. But guys, you better get to Clint's table, get some pictures, get some autographs. I know he has 10 billion more stories to tell you. And as you see, he's got the gift of gab. Great guy to talk to. And make some noise for the incredible Clint Howard, everybody, please.
This is John Glover, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Lionel Luther recommends it. Have some fun. Follow your fandom.